Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something really vital for anyone in mission work. How do you actually sustain donor support? Not just the initial gift, but for the long haul.
Right. It's a huge question. We've got some really interesting material here looking at how you move past that one-time donation to build, well, real partnerships.
Yeah, and it seems like lots of ministries face this. They hit a funding goal, which is fantastic, obviously.
Absolutely. A moment of real joy.
But then sometimes just months later, that support starts to, fade away.
Exactly. One source calls that joyous milestone the starting gun, not the finish line, which feels spot on.
Okay, the starting gun. So the challenge isn't just getting the money in the door initially.
No, not at all.
It's what happens after that initial excitement. It sounds like a constant scramble for the next new donor.
That's often the reality, yeah. And the core idea in these sources, the thing that keeps surfacing, is this need to shift.
Shift from what to what?
From what they call transactional fundraising, the sort of insert, ask, get funds, repeat cycle.
Right, I know that cycle.
To something much deeper, relational fundraising. And it seems to stand on four legs: covenant, care, communication, and community.
Covenant, care, communication, community. Okay, that sounds, definitely more sustainable, more human, really.
It does.
So why is this shift so important, right now? What's the urgency?
Well, there are a few things going on, aren't there? The economy is uncertain. People are careful with their money.
True.
Then there's just the sheer noise online. Getting anyone's attention, let alone keeping it, is tough.
Yeah, short attention spans are a real thing.
Definitely. So donor loyalty, it's become really elusive if you're not proactively building those connections.
You risk falling behind. Support shrinks.
Exactly. You really risk seeing that support just erode away. Being proactive, focusing on the heart connection, gives you an edge. It turns supporters into, advocates.
Okay, so the stakes are high. What's the big takeaway here, the kind of aha moment for someone listening?
I think it's fundamentally seeing fundraising not as a sprint, chasing gifts, but as a marathon, building those lasting relationships.
And if you miss that, what's the cost?
Well, the sources point to burnout for the team, always chasing the next dollar.
Ugh. Yeah.
Donor fatigue, people feeling like an ATM.
Right.
And even mission drift, where keeping the lights on distracts from the actual core purpose.
Okay. So our mission then for this deep dive is to figure out how to build that thriving, resilient donor community, the kinds that last.
Precisely. Long-term sustainability.
And what sources are we drawing on? What have we looked at?
Our main source is a really comprehensive document. It goes deep into relational fundraising, sustaining support.
Okay.
And what's great is it grounds everything in biblical principles, but also offers really practical, hands-on strategies.
Biblical principles. Interesting. Let's start there then. What are those foundational ideas?
Well, the idea of covenant comes up again and again, right from the Old Testament.
Like Abraham. Sinai.
Exactly. God wasn't just doing deals. He was building deep, binding relationships based on faithfulness. Think about the manna in the desert.
Daily bread.
Yeah, it wasn't a one-off miracle fund. It was about ongoing trust, daily provision, sustained engagement, not just a windfall.
That's a powerful image. Daily reliance. How does the New Testament build on that? Giving is covenant.
It really reframes generosity, doesn't it? It's less about obligation, more an overflow of our connection to Christ.
Okay.
That living water idea from John, the Spirit's work in us from Romans, giving becomes like an extension of Christ's own life and love flowing through us. It's relational at its core.
So it's a totally different way of seeing supporters. Not just funding sources, but partners, rooted in God's relationship with us.
Spot on. And the sources contrast that sharply with the transactional view, where, donors can feel like ATMs.
Which nobody wants.
Right. The relational model uses images like the shepherd and sheep, or the vine and branches, mutual connection, shared life, even shared joy.
So what does that look like practically? What defines this covenant model day to day?
A few things stand out. First, really knowing people. Both the ministry and the supporter. Not just names and amounts, but stories, passions, dreams.
Going deeper than the database entry.
Totally. Second, caring for both sides. Whether or not a gift is happening right then, the relationship matters most.
Unconditional care.
Yeah. And third, truly sharing in the mission. Celebrating wins together, grieving losses together, like a real community.
That feels like a huge shift, shared purpose, mutual investment.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the theological principles behind fostering this lasting support?
Well, one big one is seeing generosity as like part of God's very nature. God is generous, John 3.16, right?
So-
Giving his son. So when we invite people to give, we're inviting them into something core to God's character, into Christ's likeness, not just funding a project.
That connects giving directly to someone's spiritual growth. That's powerful. What else?
Faithful stewardship is huge. Honoring every gift, big or small, like the parable in Luke teaches.
Right, being faithful with little.
Exactly. And that means transparency in how money is used, wise planning, and joyful accountability. People want to see their investment is handled well.
Transparency and accountability builds trust, right?
Absolutely essential. And then there's this idea of a rhythm of grace.
Rhythm of grace. Tell me more.
Just like healthy spiritual life has rhythms, daily prayer, weekly fellowship donor relationships deepen with predictable, gracious connection points.
Not just sporadic asks.
Exactly. Regular touch points that mirror God's steady faithfulness, his reliable presence in our lives.
So consistent connection way beyond the fundraising appeal. Okay, that leads us to the how.
Yeah.
What are the practical pathways for building this relational model?
The first is simply care. Really getting to know your partners.
Beyond the surface level.
Way beyond. Understanding their passions, sure, but also their prayer needs. Asking something simple like, how can we pray for you this month? That shows you care about them, not just their wallet.
That personal touch. It makes a difference. What else under care?
Celebrating their milestones. Birthdays, anniversaries, maybe a spiritual victory they shared.
Acknowledging their life outside the ministry.
Exactly. A handwritten note, a quick voicemail, blessing, those things stick with people. They feel seen.
Valuing the person. Okay, the second pathway was communication.
Yeah, and it has to be more than just asking for money.
Yeah.
It's about showing the impact consistently,
Yep.
helping donors see the soil they've watered,
Connecting the dots for them.
For sure. Regular newsletters, but filled with stories, testimonies, maybe devotionals or spiritual growth stuff, not just appeals.
Adding value beyond the ask. Makes sense. And the third pathway you mentioned earlier, community? Or was it something else?
Ah, yes. Well, care and communication build community. The other idea was about those sustained rhythms we touched on.
Okay, the rhythms, like what?
Like those regular newsletters, yes. But also milestone celebrations,
Yeah.
maybe an annual gathering online or in person. A time to rejoice together, share the vision for what's next.
Creating shared moments. That feels vital for building that community feel.
Absolutely. Shared purpose, shared celebration.
Now, the sources mentions specific tools of the trade, too, like concrete things ministries can do.
Yeah, several practical ideas came up. One was regular one-on-one calls, maybe quarterly check-ins, just to connect, see how they're doing, hear their thoughts.
Personal outreach again. Who makes those calls?
Could be staff, could be dedicated volunteers. The key is building that personal rapport, uncovering needs, maybe even getting great ideas from them.
Okay. What other tools?
Using prayer text chains was suggested for quick updates, urgent prayer needs, builds that sense of real-time intercession, unity.
Like an SMS group.
Yeah. Another idea, impact microvideos. Short, like 60-second stories, really engaging emotionally, easy to share online.
Visual storytelling. Powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And finally, creating digital care packets, like bundles of resources, devotionals, infographics, maybe podcasts related to the mission, ongoing values, spiritual food.
Those are all really tangible, providing value beyond the transaction. The sources use some case studies too, right, to illustrate this.
They did. River Light Missions was one. It really showed that problem of the quiet inbox after funding comes in, that struggle to reconnect.
Highlights the need for ongoing engagement.
Exactly. And then there was Riverbend Community.
What did they do?
They intentionally shifted away from just sending appeals. They focused on building a network of intercessors, co-laborers, through intentional care. Personalized notes, regular prayer gatherings, small things consistently done.
And a result.
Giving stabilized, which was great. But even better, new supporters came on board and became ambassadors. They started telling the story themselves.
Wow. That shows the power of that intentional care. What does that care look like in more detail, according to the sources?
It means really knowing the supporter, their story, their giving patterns, maybe even their spiritual season.
Seeing the whole person.
Yeah, and celebrating every gift, every prayer, not just the big checks. Consistent communication, personal notes, praying for specific needs they've shared, and creating community. Virtual gatherings with worship, testimonies, prayer. making space for connection.
It's a very holistic view. So
Yeah.
what are some actionable tools for making sure support keeps flowing, that ever-flowing idea?
Okay, practical tools. Lifeline check-ins were mentioned. Short, maybe 10-minute monthly calls. Just prayer and a quick update.
Manageable. Good.
Impact snapshots, like a monthly email, but focused. One story, one great photo, maybe an answered prayer. Short, visual, powerful.
Easy to digest.
And virtual prayer hubs.
Right.
Maybe weekly video calls, just focused intercession for the ministry and partners. Builds that shared spiritual core.
Do you feel like things ministries could actually implement? Concrete steps.
Right. Very practical.
The sources loop back to theology here, right? God's steadfast covenant as the model.
Yes, exactly. God's faithfulness from Abraham right through Christ is the ultimate blueprint. His promises aren't temporary deals, they're enduring commitments. And his communication with us, that everlasting love, implies dialogue. Listening, sharing, praying, celebrating. That's the model for our partnerships too.
Ongoing dialogue, not a monologue. That leads to rethinking the ask, moving from transaction to covenant.
It does. Transactional fundraising has limits, right? Short-term spikes, maybe, but often leads to fatigue, shallow connection. It's vulnerable when times get tough.
Makes sense.
Covenantal partnership sees supporters as co-laborers. Giving flows from the relationship, from shared purpose. Feedback is welcome. Victories and setbacks are shared.
Inviting people in, not just asking from them. How does that play out practically?
Well, steadfast presence is key. Regular touch points showing you're committed to the relationship, not just the donation. Monthly emails, quarterly calls, maybe an annual retreat.
Consistent connection.
Shared stewardship, actually inviting partners into planning, seeking their prayer and input, treating them like true partners.
Empowering them.
And transparent accountability, being open. Sharing testimonies, financial reports, impact data, building trust through honesty.
Partnership and shared ownership.
Right.
What are the broader benefits of this whole approach, beyond just the money?
Huge benefits. It builds flourishing community. Givers grow spiritually too, not just recipients.
Right. Mutual growth.
It creates resilience. Trust sustains support even in tough times, like economic downturns.
Stability.
And it multiplies influence. Engaged partners become advocates. They tell the story, bring others in. It ripples outwards.
A positive cycle. Now, this next point seems crucial: internal support systems. Caring for the ministry team itself. Why is that so linked to donor relations?
The source uses the analogy of the health of the spring.
Okay.
A river's flow depends on its source, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, a minister's ability to nurture donor relationships depends directly on the team's well-being.
If the team is burned out.
Exactly. If they're stressed, unsupported, disillusioned, the external relationship-building efforts will suffer. They just won't have the capacity. It becomes unsustainable.
That makes so much sense. You can't pour from an empty cup. What's the biblical basis for caring for the team?
Paul's pretty clear about honoring and providing for leaders, especially those working hard in preaching and teaching.
Like in Timothy.
Right. And the whole body of Christ metaphor in Corinthians shows how interconnected everyone is. If one part suffers, the whole body feels it.
So team care isn't just nice, it's biblically mandated.
And has practical consequences, yeah. What are some strategies for doing that well, for team well-being?
Key things mentioned. Establishing sacred rhythms. Prioritizing rest, spiritual renewal, not just constant work.
Building in Sabbath?
Definitely. Clear, open communication channels, regular feedback loops, prevents misunderstandings, reduces stress.
Trust within the team.
And transparent finances and fair compensation. Showing the team they're valued, their work is respected.
Dignity. Absolutely fundamental. There was a case study on this too, wasn't there? Jubilee Collective.
Yes, a powerful example. They were running ragged, high turnover, low morale.
What changed?
They got intentional about team well-being. Well, spring weeks for rest, heartbeat huddles for communication, stewardship seminars for their own financial health.
Real investment in the team.
And the results were amazing. Turnover dropped, creativity soared, and donor support actually grew. People could see the team was thriving.
Wow. Direct link between internal health and external support. That's compelling.
The sources also looked back at Old Testament generosity models. What can we learn there?
Lots of richness. The tithe wasn't just a one-off, it was a habit of trust, ongoing reliance on God.
A rhythm.
Festival offerings weren't just about giving stuff, they were feasts of fellowship, binding the community together.
Shared experience.
And the gleaning laws leaving food for the poor that built support for the vulnerable right into the system. A covenantal rhythm.
Generosity woven into the fabric of society.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings us back to Contract versus covenant. Can you break that down again?
Sure. A contract is basically conditional. If you do X, then I'll do Y. It's transactional.
Got it.
A covenant is deeper. It's about loyalty, shared identity, mutual commitment that lasts even when circumstances change. Think of God's covenants based on his faithful promise.
Enduring relationship, not just an exchange.
Yeah.
And the New Testament has examples of this kind of partnership.
Oh, absolutely. Paul in the Philippians is a classic example. Joyful partnership, prayer, mutual care.
Philippians 4.
Exactly. And the whole concept of koinonia in the early church, that deep fellowship, partnership, participation, that's the DNA. Even the Macedonians giving generously out of their deep poverty, that wasn't a contract. That was grace overflowing from changed hearts. Covenantal giving.
Powerful examples. So this requires a real mindset shift in fundraising, doesn't it? Transactional to covenantal.
Huge shift. Instead of we need X dollars, please give.
Which is the common approach.
Yeah. It becomes more like, God is doing something amazing here. Will you join us in this work as a partner?
An invitation, not just a solicitation.
Right. Focusing on names and stories and potential partnership, not just hitting numbers.
Inviting people into the story.
Yeah.
Okay, what tools help foster that specific kind of covenantal partnership?
Thoughtful welcome packets can set the tone. A heartfelt letter, maybe a prayer journal, a small symbolic gift says, welcome to the family.
First impressions matter.
Quarterly partnership reports blending transparency, finances, activities with stories, prayer points, vision, keeping people connected.
Regular rich updates.
Prayer circles, small groups, maybe video calls for shared intercession, builds that koinonia.
Deeper connection.
And things like interactive impact dashboards online or volunteer hubs, ways for people to see the impact and get involved more directly.
Making it tangible and participatory. Now, the idea of documenting this covenant, does that have biblical roots?
It does, surprisingly. Think of those Old Testament ceremonies like dividing animals or written decrees on stone tablets, visible signs, public promises.
Okay.
And the new covenant itself sealed in blood, remembered in communion. It's a living reminder of commitment.
So a covenant document isn't just paperwork. It can be a powerful symbol.
Exactly. It solidifies commitment, clarifies expectations.
What should be in such a document? What are the key parts?
The sources suggest 3 ministry promises: transparency, open books, pastoral care, supporting partners, and spiritual updates, connecting partnership to worship.
What the ministry commits to.
And 3 partner commitments: prayer as the foundation, participation beyond just checks, and sustained giving, understood as worship.
What the partner commits to. Mutual promises.
Right. And then a sign and seal, maybe a formal signing, a tangible token like a stone or card, and a ceremonial moment to mark the commitment publicly.
Making it official, memorable. There was an example of this, the Philippine church.
Yeah, they created a document outlining promises, used an engraved river stone as a token, and had a commissioning ceremony. It really deepened the sense of shared mission and accountability.
Made the partnership real. Okay,
Yes.
Beyond the document, what about ongoing rituals that root relationships?
These are the regular practices like covenant renewal retreats echoing Israel's festivals, times for worship, teaching, recommitting together,
Annual touchstones?
and those quarterly heart reports we mentioned, like Paul's letters mixing stories and data, keeping people informed and connected emotionally.
Consistent reinforcement. The language we use matters too, right? Language of belonging.
Hugely important. Moving away from donors and recipients
Which can feel detached.
towards words like co-laborers, fellow servants, family. Language that reflects our shared identity in Christ, builds community, emphasizes partnership.
Creates a we, not us and them.
Exactly. And this connects to story-centered communication. Why is story so powerful here? Stories bypass the head and go straight to the heart, right? Jesus used parables constantly. Authentic visual testimonies, short videos of changed lives, they make the gospel impact incredibly real. Modern parables.
Showing, not just telling.
And things like interactive prayer maps can connect people visually and specifically to needs around the world, often linked to those stories. Prayer becomes more informed, more personal.
Merging story and prayer. Okay, let's talk cultivating endurance, the long-term view.
Super important. That 80-20 principle comes up. A lot of support often comes from a core group.
Right.
And retaining those core partners is way more cost-effective, like 5-7 times more than always finding new ones.
Wow, that's significant. What happens if we neglect that core?
Donor fatigue sets in. They feel ignored, only contacted for money. Vague reports don't help.
They drift away.
Or worse, the ministry experiences mission drift chasing funds becomes the main thing, not the actual purpose.
So how do we cultivate that core 20%? How do we focus on retention?
By intentionally nurturing them,
Hmm.
mapping relationships, having a rhythm of personalized touch points, creating those covenant moments, providing spiritual nourishment.
Tending the garden of relationship, as one source put it.
Exactly. Seeing retention as discipleship, not just donor management.
That's a great reframe. Okay, the current of connection and intentional stewardship. What's the essence here?
It's about seeing stewardship not just as managing money, but as sacred. Gifts as worship, a liturgy of grace.
Connecting, giving to worship.
Like Paul in the Philippians, praying for givers, communicating transparently, inviting deeper participation. It's reciprocal.
What happens if we lose that connection?
Disengagement. Supporters feel unseen, taken for granted, maybe disillusioned. The vision fades for them. Intentional stewardship keeps that vision alive and shared.
Nurturing the shared purpose. Okay, back to internal health, sustainable souls. Why revisit team well-being?
Because you just can't lead effectively from empty. A burnt-out team can't cast vision powerfully. Giving becomes mechanical, not heartfelt.
The source impacts the flow.
Right, so prioritizing rest, sacred rhythms, clear communication, financial transparency, spiritual check-ins, it's all natal for the team's health and their ability to authentically connect with partners.
Healthy team, healthy partnerships.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Let's talk invisible currency of trust. How do we build that?
Trust isn't built overnight. It's like relational equity, earned over time.
Ow.
Through consistency. Consistent communication, personalized acknowledgments, really listening to feedback, celebrating wins together, predictable and purposeful updates, small acts consistently done.
It's the accumulation of truthful interactions.
Exactly, which leads straight into transparent reporting. What does truly transparent reporting look like? It's more than just glossy brochures. It's clarity, honesty, humanity.
Owning the challenges too.
Absolutely. Answering the questions people might hesitate to ask. Inviting partnership, creating shared ownership in the good and the difficult, using stories, being humble.
Building trust through authenticity. And the centrality of celebration. Why is that so key?
Celebration reinforces trust. Look, your partnership made this happen. It strengthens relationships through shared joy and testimony.
Remembering together.
And it reminds everyone why they're doing this. Regularly celebrating wins, big and small, and acknowledging the partner's role fuels ongoing engagement.
Acknowledging the togetherness. Okay, the ministry of presence. What does that mean?
It's about being with people, not just transacting with them. Like Jesus eating with, walking with, weeping with people.
Relational depth.
So practically, check-in calls just to see how they are, personalized notes, praying for them specifically, sharing unsolicited good news from the field, showing you care about them.
Being present in their lives.
Yeah.
How about deeper engagement beyond just giving money? Why is that important?
Because God invites us to co-labor with him, right? It's participatory. When people have firsthand experience, mission trips, volunteering, connecting with beneficiaries, creative projects, it creates a much deeper bond. Shared sacrifice, shared experience. They move from donor to deeply invested partner.
Active participation deepens commitment. Okay, can we revisit the touch points of trust framework in more detail?
Sure. It outlines 5 key touch points for the donor journey.
What are they?
1, welcome connection, making that initial contact warm and personal. 2, impact-focused storytelling, regularly sharing compelling stories. 3, prayer-fueled check-ins, those relational calls focused on care.
Ooh.
4, mission participation invitations, opportunities to engage beyond giving. And 5, honest and transparent updates, regular, clear reporting, including challenges.
A kind of annual map for donor engagement.
Yeah, a framework for being consistent, personal, and purposeful, just like God is with us.
That's very helpful. Lastly, sustaining spiritual engagement for leaders and sustaining partnerships long-term.
For leaders, it's about endurance, recognizing the weight of the work, prioritizing Sabbath, healthy boundaries, prayer as core strategy, not an add-on, avoiding leading on empty.
Protecting their own spiritual core.
And for long-term partnerships, it comes back to the main themes. Relational over transactional, covenantal participation, clear and compelling vision, and underpinning it all, consistent care for the team, and intentional, trust-building stewardship with partners.
It's all interconnected. Team health, relational focus, clear vision, trust.
Absolutely. And the sources wrap up with some really great reflective questions and actionable exercises.
For leaders and listeners.
Yes, designed to help anyone listening take these ideas and really apply them, moving from thinking about it to actually doing it.
Practical steps to shift toward that covenantal approach.
Exactly. Things like redefining the ask, auditing your current approach, focusing on that core 80-20, building trust brick by brick, mapping out prayer partners, even exercises for organizing tasks and acting with intention.
Really valuable tools for implementation. Okay, this has been incredibly rich. Let's try to summarize. The core insight seems to be that sustainable support isn't just about fundraising techniques.
No.
It's about building deep, covenantal relationships with partners, mirroring God's own faithfulness.
Spot on. And the key takeaways for you listening are: shift your mindset from transaction to relation. Prioritize care, communication, and shared mission. Remember, team well-being is foundational. And use practical strategies to build trust and invite deeper engagement.
We really hope you'll take the time to reflect on those exercises in the source material. Think about how these principles fit your own situation, your ministry.
Yeah, and please reach out if you have questions or want to discuss this further.
Absolutely. We'd love to continue the conversation.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Legacy in ministry isn't just about what's left behind materially. It's about the relationships built together.
Ah, that's good.
Those enduring, joyful, rooted partnerships based on a shared eternal vision. It's really a call to long obedience in the same direction, looking to Jesus as our ultimate model of investing in relationships.